No Alia, no Benue. No Alia, no Benue. Well, uh, this is a slogan that has caused a lot of controversies within the political space in Benue State. It has generated controversy both in the camp of the incumbent governor and those in the opposition. When we want to categorize the opposition, you know that within the same APC, you still have a faction, those for Alia and those for the other camp, still serving as opposition. Now, let's take a critical look at the slogan, no Alia, no Benue, what it really means. Now, the slogan, no Alia, no Benue, we can liken it to a political chant used by supporters of the Alia administration to express confidence in the current government and a desire for continuity in the leadership. Now, for those who chant it, the phrase is symbolic, a way of saying they believe the present administration's best represents their hopes for Benue State at this time. However, critics and members of the opposition have raised concern about the slogan, arguing that it sounds absolute and may appear to reduce the identity or future of Benue State to one individual. But of course, in a democratic setting, such concerns are valid, as governance is meant to reflect diverse opinions and collective ownership. Now, ultimately, the slogan should be understood within the context of political expression. Like many campaign chants, it reflects emotion and political alignment rather than a literal or constitutional position. Supporters are also free to promote it, just as others are free to question or reject it. Both are essential parts of a healthy democracy. But what has sparked a lot of rage and anger within the last 2 to 3 days is the fact that the Tenagi, a traditional ruler, Daniel Abomtse, when receiving the SSA on illegal levies, Civic also chanted the phrase no Alia, no Benue, and this has caused a lot of debate within the opposition camp and even those within the APC. For the fact that the Tenagi chanted no Alia, no Benue, it has become a thing of concern to others. Others have called him a political traditional ruler, while others are defending. But can we safely say that Abomtse first is a citizen of Benue State? He has the right to align with whosoever he wants to, irrespective of being a traditional ruler. And now again, others will also argue that being a traditional ruler, he needs to be neutral. Well, if you watch the video, no Alia, no Benue is a slogan that has been brought on board by TV Benda, the SSA, and also the youth leader in Benue State within the APC confines. We may want to disagree that the traditional rulers are independent of the administration, whichever administration. If you trace back the history of traditional rulers, starting from the paramount rulers, Benue State never had a direct system of governance. During the colonial period under the British rule in Nigeria, particularly from the early 20th century until the late 1940s, the appointment of traditional rulers among the chief people, and by extension, the structures that evolved into what we now call first-class chiefs in Benue State, was shaped by the British policy of indirect rule. This system aimed to govern through existing local authorities where possible, but it often required creating or adopting structures to fit administrative needs, especially in non-centralized segmentarian societies like the Tiv, who lacked hereditary kings or centralized paramount rulers. Before British contact, which intensified around 1900 to 1908 with expedition into Tiv land, Tiv society was egalitarian and segmentary, organized around kingship's line. Leadership was collective, held by elders or influential individuals without a single paramount king. There was no centralized Tiv or a hereditary monarchy. Now, the British found indirect rule difficult to apply here, unlike in the Northern Emirates where there was an established emir system. They initially appointed local individuals as chiefs or direct district heads, often called to Ubute or white man's chiefs by the Tiv, later known as Tio, to handle tasks like tax collection, maintaining order, and serving as intermediaries. These appointments were based on perceived loyalty, then efficiency, or ability to enforce colonial policies rather than traditional legitimacy. Many were seen as outsiders or black foreigners, Butei by the Tiv, leading to resistance and tensions. Now, the creation and appointment of Tiv, the paramount ruler. The push intensified for a unified Tiv paramount ruler, where it came from both Tiv's elites, including World War veterans and educated leaders who wanted representation and unity, and the colonial administration, which needed a single point of contact for governing the large Tiv population, comprising in size to some northern emirates but fragmented. Now, after persistent demands during visits by colonial officials like Governor Richard in the 1940s, and leveraging events like Chiefs Conference, the British created the Tiv institution in 1946. This followed the establishment of the Tiv Central Council to centralized administration. The first Tiv was selected through a process involving Tiv representatives or kingmakers who chose Maki Zakbe, a World War II veteran and retired army sergeant, on September 1946. The colonial government formally accepted and installed him on April 3, 1947, presenting him as the paramount chief to Tiv 1. The appointment was a compromise. Tiv imputed in selection but ultimate approval and recognition by the British colonial authorities. The Tiv was subordinate to colonial officials, performing executive, judicial, and administrative roles over Tiv land, while aiding indirect rule, tax collection, and dispute resolution. This marked a significant shift, centralizing what had been a decentralized society to meet colonial needs and Tiv aspiration for unity. Now, the low-level chiefs, equivalent to later first-class chiefs. At lower levels, the British appointed district heads or clans and leaders in a similar top-down manner. Individuals were chosen for administrative usefulness. These were not always traditional elders, but often those cooperative with the British. In Tiv areas, this built hierarchy under the emerging Tiv. For other groups in what became Benue province, e.g. Idoma, similar patterns applied, with paramount figures like the Ochidoma emerging around 1947 for administrative convenience. The first-class chief category, as we know it today, is largely a post-colonial development, formalized in Benue state laws after independence. During the colonial times, The focus was on appointed chiefs for districts or divisions, not a rigid graded system like modern first class and second class. Colonial appointments were pragmatic and imposed by the British for governance efficiency under indirect rule, often overriding or inventing traditional structures rather than purely indigenous process. So the appointment of first class to chief was not an indigenous process. It was by the British policy and British governance. The Totives too itself was a colonial era innovation from 1946 to 1947, born from necessity and advocacy. This foundation influenced the modern system where selection now involves chief kingmakers, rotation between ruling houses and state government approval. The post-colonial evolution of the Totiv institution reflects a transition from a colonial administrative creation to a deeply entrenched symbol of Tiv cultural unity, political representation, and traditional governance in independent Nigeria. So, traditionally, Tiv society did not vest cultural preservation in centralized kingship or royal institutions. Rather, cultural norms, values, and practices were collectively preserved through lineage heads, elders, age grade system, and communal rituals. Consequently, Tiv traditional rulers, as later political constructs, were not originally the primary custodians of cultural preservation. It will be difficult to separate the traditional rulers from politics because, ironically, there are some factors we need to look at. In reality, traditional rulers are recognized and regulated by government laws. That is one. Another thing is they receive state funding or stipends. You can't say a traditional ruler should go against the incumbent. And you also know that they operate within political boundaries, such as the local government, states, and regions. And systematically, they are often used as political mobilizers, also legitimizing symbols for state power. And then they also serve as informal influencers during election. Why traditional rulers can and should be conceptually separated from partisan politics in order to preserve cultural integrity and communal trust. The reality of modern governance makes complete separation very difficult. What is therefore required is not isolation but clearly defined boundaries between cultural authority and political power. So, before we call for the head of Abonte Daniel Nagi, we should also know that his appointment is political. They are all answerable to the state government laws. So indirectly, they serve as a political stooge for whoever the governor is at any time and at any point.